Shirley here with Sirius Dallas Moon, and this video is going to be a bit different. Um, I'm reading basically about Greenlanders protesting against Trump, literally saying we will never be Americans, um, while Americans are combating ICE. So this is, yeah, um, and this prompts a conversation that I think is challenging to make because it would stir up the everythingness that has been swiped under the rug everywhere. First of all, we are at the threshold of colonialism o'clock. Neptune in Aries is literally worldwide longing for sovereignty, which also means seeking to have sovereignty or to expand sovereignty worldwide. So these are basically ages of empire, or small ages of empires that have dual experience to them, because Neptune shows us in every empire that rises, it shows us um, what needs to dissolve to expand, and it shows us by expansion. So if I take a look at my geopolitical situation, um, residing in, let's say, Israel or Israel Palestine or the Dead Sea area, um, we can see the three empires. Um, while Israel has in itself desire to expand, we can see the desire to expand, colonizing, so to speak, colonizing Israel. And I can see the cultural dance that's basically happening, whether it's showing, whether it's the Chinese part of the algorithm on YouTube displaying the relevant Chinese figure or Chinese culture figures that I do relate to. And it's sort of testing the waters to see what do people in this region relate to, what do they not relate to, and consequently, I could see that the things that, let's say, um, how should I say that? The things that I relate to, I also relate to in the culture of residence, whereas the things that I also don't relate to in the culture of residence. Okay, namely trauma bonds instead of safe and secure attachment, and so on and so forth. So, one of the things that I definitely saw upon 7th of October was the many MK Ultra, Ultra South, US graffiti writings on the wall, and even the years before that, the understanding that um, that United States is not over there, and that we are fiscally and culturally affected, and some would say affecting one another, interfered, and some would say interfering in one another's regimes, um, creates a situation where I never got to travel to United States. Okay, very beautiful country. It always felt like something that is nearly impossible, um, because either one would need to have a shit ton of money and do a coast to coast. Illegally working in a place is not good for people because they could be trafficked. And also, like, why work illegally? And legally working in a place, the working culture, although is less terrible than Israel, was not something that I could really accommodate to. And and then in that situation where I didn't set foot on the land, um, I can't say I'm not affected by. Okay, same with China. Many things that are affecting us and we don't even know are coming from one empire or another. Um, the way that I see the way that I see things, the topics of human trafficking and all those things that really scare about colonialism already happen in Israel by Israelis. In fact, I'm in contact with a lady that escaped human trafficking as an Israeli that was trafficked by Israelis 18 times in 52 trafficking places within Israel. That's more important to tackle than trying to post whichever flag saying I'm not this, I'm not that. Um, where let's face it, if China takes over the region, the smart thing to do would be to learn Chinese and whatever feminists, let's say, struggles, to fight them also in regards to the local culture. Because Chinese people are not oppressing me, the Jews, the trafficked Jews are. Even the 7th of October, then by Israelis, 7th of October, Israelis don't have, how should I say that? If you go around Israel, mostly you won't hear, oh, we did a genocide, we did a this, we did a that. You might even hear people say, wait a second, if German people experienced something like that, and there were Jewish human traffickers and ritual abusers that were slaughtering Germans like that, it's no wonder that they wanted to exterminate, because that type of thing that happened really shifts the perspective, and that was the point. Um, but I know it wouldn't be possible without the ritual abuse that's done to Israelis by Israelis in trafficking cults and extortion cults. Hamas could have never done it without them, just as Hitler could have never done it without them. Okay? Basically, what it would be right to say, well, I don't like Hamas, it reminds me of the human traffickers. Um, Also, Hamas wanted people to convert to Islam. Here it is to convert to Orthodox Judaism, which is completely different and could even be considered cult of Baal. Okay, if they're traffickers, they're wearing penguin suits, then what they're actually practicing is not Judaism. And if it is, then it's even worse, you know. But um, this is something that I see that anyway, when it comes to colonialism or the risk of being colonized, um, what we're not gonna like, usually we have in our culture, and are either swiping under the rug or dismissing that as conspiracy. Even I was young girl, um, granddaughter to Holocaust survivors, where people would talk about the blood libels. And I look at ritual satanic abuse and I'm like, it's not blood libels. It was just not only practiced by Jews, and those that were practicing that were under the guise of being Jews, as there would be under the guise of being Christians or Muslims. There are things that people see in the scriptures, and all of the scriptures are pretty convoluted. Um, Knowing that is understanding that, um, let's say if tomorrow, I don't know, China conquered the region, there's a wealth of Chinese culture that I never had the chance to be exposed to, that is rich and fascinating and interesting. Just as there is a wealth of American culture that I was more exposed to, and that I was not exposed to as well, that is fascinating and interesting and inspiring, and without, all these teachings about secure attachment, attachment styles, pragmatism, and the entire, pragmatic psychology. The naming of MK Often and MK Ultra, which is so important to understand what is it that we're dealing with. Um, those are very interesting. And to say I'm never going to be, let's say, American, I think it's very weird speaking fluent English, that's first. And, and I don't know if that's constructive, because if what happens to Americans affects me, it means that I need to see what happens to Americans. What is happening with ice? Do they plan to import that to Greenland? Saying I'm not going to be an American is not going to bring a union with the American people against targeting individuals and civilians and trafficking them, which is the big scary. Okay? It's not about, oh, losing the culture, losing the this, losing the that. Okay? That's the side effect. That's what's done to traffic people. Um, do I like the melting pot approach? No, I don't like the melting pot approach in Israel. That's the core issue. The melting pot approach was a part of rape and extortion and ritual abuse that was supposed to create people in the image to the function of basically what they needed people to be created, whether it's labor, extortion, and so on and so forth. That's a global issue. It, to say that there is no military basis, that it's also a human trafficking hub in Kiryat Gat and other regions, would be a lie. Is it about Americans? Maybe, but they couldn't have done that without the Israelis that did that to Israelis before them and set the infrastructure to import more trafficking. And also, what's happening here affecting other people. When there was 7th of October, there were kidnapped people that came to work as foreigners. They were Vietnamese. They were, I think this person was from Indonesia or something. Some Americans, some Dutch people. Do extortion cults here don't extort there? Of course they do. So the way that I see it is, hey, if there is another regime that is going to take over the area, then that means I have my human rights, and that regime has to accommodate. It's not about, oh, the cultural rights or the this. No, individual human rights. And most likely the things that I would not like, I probably didn't like in the culture of origin. Um, the opportunities of this time is really to get to know more cultures, because upon colonialism, it's two cultures meeting one another, laughing at one another. Okay? Seriously. It's kind of like working in an international place and every person come with their culture. You know, when we had international conferences of, let's say, Model UN, everybody came with their culture and the amount of racist jokes from everyone. Yeah, so an English person or that came from, Monty Python culture of satire on everything sacred laughed at the silly walk of a Greece person, and that Greece person got offended. Um, those are funny things. Suddenly there was this something to do, I think it was Diwali, and there was an Indian person that suddenly wore something around his neck that is of his cultural origin. Now, let's face it, with the suit and ties and boring clothing, it catches the eye. It looks different. The first thing is like respect the culture. The first impression, like, oh my God, what? Some people burst into laughter because they don't know what is. And they could be very sacred to people, but um, if we're too emotionally attached to our cultures, the coming 50 years are going to be a big mess because we're going to see our own cultures in the eyes of others, the good thing and the bad thing. And for people that didn't have international settings, um, whether it's from workplace or something like Modern UN or something of that sort, um, they're not going to experience it as easily because it's going to be forced upon them rather than them volitionally, going to a workplace that they know is international. Um, or not, okay? But there's also, like I said, I think every people have the expectation that out there over the border there are, nymphs waiting for them to, um, anything that, how should I say that? It's gonna be very weird to say that because my parents met for 3 weeks and then married for 14 years. So, but most people are not my parents, and how should I say that? And they met at 73. They married at 73, which was a great time. Great time in the world. They couldn't receive letters because there was fear that there would be bombs there. And my father served in NATO, so it was, um, you know. But this is where, how should I say that? If something, or if people think that they're just going to um, party and do things that later a meeting cult lady had a saying for that, because she said, yeah, later we would have to deal with them raping and stuff, meaning the army. That's, it's kind of like, I'll speak from my culture. A lot of Israelis were known to go to hotels and loot everything. Not like the things that you can take, like, I don't know, the small soap or something like that. Um, but no, the everythingness. And I have no idea if they were avenging the Nazis or what, or where did they take that from? But it kind of, it people wouldn't want them as tourists anymore when they did that. But when we're talking about the worst things, how do you think they got the Israeli chain of command to comply with 7th of October? Okay, all these visits to Romania, all those visits to Thailand, they were on tape. You sleep with a trafficked person, they don't read, how should I say that? They don't read. People think, oh, they're gonna know the king said this, so what do I get? No, 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 no. They read the thread through the nervous system. Now, if you haven't done anything, then they can read the thread through the nervous system, and that would be considered targeted individuals. When you slept with someone that was trafficked, is a different story. It means you raped, and now basically there's something else going on that's to do with mind control. And that's the end game. If you raped, that was on camera. That's why the army sent you there. I know some military people can't say it, but extortion cults operate within the army as well. Any army. Because then they're going to need to exploit people, and when the people want to get recognitions as veterans, they can show them the people that they raped. And then those people would be used to traffic, to drug deal, to... Okay, now in countries where army service is mandatory, people who disobey legal order get tortured in the psych ward. And that affects the entire field of psychiatry that can't give you housing first, independent of ability to work and believe in the patient and ceasing all targeting of the patient, which is the cure to schizophrenia, because they'll have to deal with the fact that they won't be able to use that to basically torture people back into extortion cults when they disobey legal order in a mandatory army. People that actually had a mental crisis that needed help, and usually it was a crisis of having lost a job, having lost a housing. They found that they were being chemically castrated, tortured, threatened, and in the places where people go to, which would be workplace for some or studies for some, whether certification or academic, it's extortion cults. because they need to affect also the policies through what? First of all, a hierarchic, rank based, that makes it a must to commit crimes against humanity, to have a house, to have a job, and gives the guise of it gives the myth of diplomatic immunity. It does. The people that think they have diplomatic immunity, unless you are escaping extortion cults, you don't have diplomatic immunity. You have a myth of diplomatic immunity so that you'll commit the crimes, but then their people are said to be disposed of because those crimes are crimes where immunity does not work. Human trafficking, immunity does not work there. Nazi war crimes, immunity does not work there. People think genocide. No, 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 no. Killing masses of people, yeah, that's a crime against humanity. Not even letting people die, torturing them to mind control, experiments, trafficking, drug looting, that's something that negates diplomatic immunity. Kenya removed the diplomatic immunity of Bill Gates because of some castrating substances in some sort of a medical injection he was offering. I think it was for malaria. Not even talking COVID. When they want to change the judiciary, as they wanted in Israel and I think also in the United States, okay, the situation for people like Ali Khamenei is very risky because Ali Khamenei could not run Iran for 2029 is going to be 40 years without having all the tapes on all the people that could have invaded Iran, including Israel. Why did he manage to kill the protesters? Even Trump made his move, Bibi Netanyahu made his move, and still he said he's not going to kill the protesters. Then he said he killed the protesters. They say, oh, that's an act of power. Yeah, but why was he not afraid that they are going to see it as the final straw and completely run down anything to do with Iran? Because he has something. He doesn't need to nuke anybody. All he needs is to publish. People are going to watch that because that's freaking interesting. Is he a saint? Absolutely not. When we don't know these things, it's very easy to get caught up in they're decolonizing, they're erasing our culture, they're doing the same things that were done by the culture to the culture from the outside. And usually, only when it's done from the outside, people begin to notice it. Because it was hidden, because it was rare cases, because it was isolated, because each and every individual that experienced that is extremely isolated, and because it was swiped under the rug as satanic panic, the Me Too went too far. Um, the agenda that wanted to normalize pedophilia in schools preceded any type of colonialism we'll see. Now, midheaven 22ing, Venus opening a cycle with Pluto. Mercury sextiling Neptune. And by the way, when we talk about um, globally, the way people are ritually abused, also cattle is. People talk about the cloning of ships. They clone babies. Okay? Bill Clinton, absolutely not a saint, apologized for cloning Project MK Ultra and the syphilis experiments in 1995. That's a guy that was rubbing shoulders with Epstein. They were forced to be, if I take it accordingly to Anya Weck, they were forced into these rituals where they had to wear a dress themselves. It would show that they are submitting or whatnot. And they were forced to rape children. People say, what do you mean forced? It's Holocaust. What's happening there? The Holocaust lasted for 4 years. That thing is freaking eternal, and the people are dissociated. Am I justifying them? No. I'm explaining to people what they want to do to we the people. I know a lot of people will say, well, when I was raped and I was molested, I didn't rape any people because you were outside of the context of being raped and tortured until you rape and torture. And when those were children, then that was done to them by adults. They were raping and torturing other children. To dissociation. And memories come back. I can say that there are many things, even of something that is 1 to the fraction of a fraction of a fraction, that I can say everything I've been through in my life. One of the weirdest things is the mystery about what preceded them, even in childhood. Or where was that coming from? Um, Before I went to certain psychologists, before that I went to someone who was um, EMDR, something like that. I know that's connected to Scientology. I didn't know it back then. When I talked about something that happened to me when I was really a child, he said you couldn't have responded like that as a child. You couldn't have responded like that as a child unless something preceded that. And the terror on his face, so much so that he began to convolute. Like he could not even contain And basically I had to leave because it was getting me to, and he was just encouraging me to heal, and to heal I had to speak. At first I couldn't speak, and then I couldn't stop speaking, and he was no longer, he was scared to his knees were shaking. He was so scared that, I don't know, maybe he had to do ritual abuse to become okay, and probably had traumas in himself, probably went through some sort of ritual abuse. Was he a programmer? I don't know. Like, he saw things. I know he saw things because I was looking at his face, but that's pretty much. And to begin with, he was quite reluctant, and I could not find any sort of therapy. So to begin with, it's not, it's kind of like it's not his fault. He was not, nobody was competent to treat that, and yet it couldn't go untreated, and yet we had to be our own doctors in spite of a system that didn't want people to heal.